Assemblymember Kim, Assemblymember Tannousis, good to see you both. Thank you for being here once again.
Thank you for having us.
So let's get into this right now, right? And let me get your initial thoughts first and foremost. Was this a budget that you were happy to vote on after being a month late? Assemblymember Kim, I'll begin with you.
I don't think anyone was happy with this budget. That is the art of compromising. We have to give a lot to get to a point where we can pass this budget. But I feel like the legislature gave too much. But I do respect how hard the speaker in my house fought for this budget, which is why I ultimately supported it.
Okay.
But there are many things that we feel uncomfortable moving forward.
Yeah, and we'll get into those specifics. But Assemblymember Tannousis, your thoughts?
I was a bit disappointed, to be honest, Dan. I was expecting more substantive changes to the bail reform laws. I understand there were some changes in terms of from least restrictive language to bail to now some kind of reasonable standard. But I think in order to actually combat the increase in violence in our communities, I think they should have added more charges to the designated crimes where a judge is allowed to set bail. And they also should have put in a dangerousness standard.
Okay.
I think the state of New Jersey in 2017, when they passed these laws, they actually had the dangerousness standard put in. And I think that we're at a big disadvantage by not having that. And I think we'll continue to see an increase in crime.
So let me get to there. Bail reform said to be a huge reason for the delay, right? You both know this. The governor telling me that when she came on the show that she hopes that the change that you're talking about, Assemblymember Tannousis, will help judges address these repeat offenders for crimes like shoplifting, right? The Republican leader of the Senate, though, Rob Ortt, called the change less than meaningless. So Assemblymember Kim, you've talked about bail reform with me very often. What were your thoughts on the rollback once again?
I think she's halfway in, halfway out. We don't know what the governor really stands for. She's talking on both sides of her mouth, and she needs to go and stick with one conviction when it comes to criminal justice reform. Data after data shows that bail has no correlation with increase in violence and crime. It is the social conditions that the Republicans have a right to criticize because it is the Democrats in charge for the last many decades.
Yeah.
And we failed to improve the conditions around those individuals for years. That's why we have more violence. But instead of going back and doing the whole hard work, holding the governor and the administration accountable to rebuild the capacity to actually take care of people who are lost in our homeless shelters,
Yes.
lost in our subways, we're not getting to that.
So are you two in agreement then? Are you guys in agreement on the bail reform issue?
I wouldn't say we're in agreement as to the bail reform issue. I just think we're both unhappy, possibly two very different reasons. I do agree with Ron. Not enough has been done to help people with mental health issues. Certainly not enough. If you remember, Thrive NYC was an absolute disaster, and more needs to be done to help those people. But you know, one thing, Dan, that I haven't heard throughout the entire budget are how they're going to help improve the conditions on Rikers Island. The conditions on Rikers Island are an absolute disaster, both for the corrections officers and for the inmates. Mm-hmm. And I talk to judges all the time, and they are scared. Some of them are actually scared of sending people to Rikers Island. So I didn't hear any of that in this budget in order to help better the conditions.
Yeah.
But I would have to disagree with Ron on this point. Bail reform significantly disadvantages a judge. A judge is the best person to be able to set bail on a case or to hold a defendant because the judge is the one that gets to see the defendant.
Okay.
He talks to the prosecutor, he sees about the case. So that's why I think we need increased judicial discretion.
Assemblymember Kim, you want to address that?
Again, we're just focused on the symptoms that have no direct correlation with the increase in crime and violence. We have to go back and do the hard work of improving the social conditions that fuel the crime and violence and not individualize the crime, which is what we have done for so many years.
Let me talk about housing for a second, right? Because we know that the minimum wage was increased. That's great news. But if you can't afford to live in New York, what are you going to do, right? So let's talk about housing overall. It was yanked out of the budget entirely. Did you both vote in favor or against? Let me start with you, Mr. Tannousis.
I was so happy to see that was completely taken out of the budget. Mm-hmm. I think to take away local control from municipalities, including the city of New York, taking away their ability for zoning and to determine what type of zoning and what type of building should happen in their own municipalities or cities, and for the state to take that over, I think was an absolute ludicrous proposition. And I'm so happy that it was not included in this budget. And I have to say, I think both parties, I think both Republicans and Democrats saw what a potential disaster this would be. And I believe that's why you were able to see it being taken out of the.
Assemblymember Kim, were you for or against this? What'd you think overall?
I think the governor identifying the problem was correct. We have a big housing crisis, but we need a ground-up coalition-building movement to get toward the right solutions. And for me, we have to look at other states like North Dakota. They have a public banking infrastructure in place to allow public employees to make deposits and leverage that money to build the necessary affordable housing and social housing that state needs. New York can actually learn from places like Republican states like North Dakota around public banking to build more public housing.
Yeah, and the governor said she's going to still focus on this, even though it wasn't included in the budget. But I want to talk about the migrant crisis right now. Title 42 is set to expire, and this is a big issue, right? The state now pledging $1 billion, which is significantly less than what Mayor Adams was requesting. Now more buses are headed to New York from Texas. In fact, one arrived Wednesday filled with asylum seekers. So, Assemblymember Tannousis, is the state in a position to lend any more support? What are your thoughts on the fact that the buses are still arriving?
I don't think the state has any choice. I think this is a complete failure of the federal government. We are not securing our borders, and now we're dealing with this crisis that is taking away from our actual crisis of homelessness. And I think that this is a situation where the state didn't have a choice. So they had to pledge $1 billion, or else the city of New York would be in a whole lot of trouble.
Let me stop you there because I'm up against the clock here. And so I got your thoughts on that. I want to give Mr. Kim the same amount of time to respond about the migrant crisis.
We don't have the administrative capacity to take care of our own constituents in our backyards. We certainly do not have the capacity to take care of a new group of migrants that are coming in. But I want to be hopeful. I want to give
are you saying
the
no more
governor and
buses?
the mayor a chance to continue to figure out a solution here. But based on what they've done so far with the homeless crisis, I don't feel confident that they're in a place right now to have the administrative capacity to take care of more vulnerable people.
So you're saying no more buses?
I don't see how we're able to do that at this point. I mean, we can't just punt this problem to nonprofits, because that's not a solution. Mm-hmm. We need to build capacity, and we haven't shown any signs that this administration or the city has taken those steps to build that.
All right. Assemblymember Kim, Assemblymember Tannousis, it sounds like you're more in agreement on some issues than one might think. But good to see you both. Appreciate you both being here, okay?
Thank you for having me, Dad.